Great. I love to welcome everybody in. It is May 30th, 11:59 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Oh my goodness. Lori Van Dusen, I have been so looking forward to this. You've been everywhere in my head, believe it or not. I love that you read this book on Audible. You get hearts, you get gold stars for, I can't imagine what that process is like. We're gonna actually talk about it. So as our guests are coming in, but man, that when I literally say that you've been in my head and my car and on
It was
airplane.
funny you said when I was trying to get on the link and I was having problems, you're like, I recognize your voice.
It was
That
so
was
good. You're
funny.
like, this is Lori. I was like, I know. So this is so great. We're
That's funny.
so thrilled, so honored. I will say that I'm very emotional today. I don't know why. So I'm going to really try to keep it together. This is a story. Lori's story is so powerful, so inspiring. And, I really honestly feel that it's something that we could all learn from. We take a look, and you and I, Lori, were talking about this before, but we look at other women, especially, and man, you have such incredible credentials and achievement. And we're all like, oh, I want to be her. Look at her. She's got it all together. She's got it all together. Kind of like, what's wrong with me? You've done so much in your career, and for you to just, open your heart and be totally transparent and open with your story is just something that I think that all of us can learn from. So I thank you very much for sharing that.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Great. And thank you so much for our attendees. Really, really appreciate you. Kina Pettijohn, I have to say you're our number one advocate here for book club. You've joined them. I think this is our 12th one. So we're really honored that you're here, as well as you, Bonnie and Jamie. And for anybody that's listening on replay, I know I got a couple of DMs today on LinkedIn, and they're like, I've got meetings, I'm busy. We're like, yeah, we know. Right, Lori and I know. But let me
Yeah.
just read that housekeeping, a little bit of an intro here. And so I am coming to you from, my background's a little different. We're in Pinehurst, North Carolina, instead of our usual Intentionally Studios right outside of Philly. Our special guest today, Lori Van Dusen, Running with Grace. This is available on Amazon. It's also available on Amazon Kindle. And my favorite is Audible, in Lori's voice. So powerful, so beautifully. It's a beautiful book. We're going to talk about that. You all know that this book club was started by Kelly Waldrick, the co-founder over at Intentionally. So give her a lot of credit for wanting to shine the spotlight on leaders like and pioneers like Lori, to learn their story, to get a sense of who they are and the work that they're doing here. So I'm going to put the links in the chat right now for all of you. Please make sure that you are connected to Lori on all the embassies. And I put the book in there as well in all of the different formats. So if you're having any problems, I don't think anybody's having any technical issues today, but just kind of DM me. And last but not least, it's recorded. Everybody who registered will get a replay, and we'll also share that on Intentionally's website. This is educational in nature. So again, if anybody's listening on the replay, this is, if you have any questions about your personal financial situation, actually you can consult with Lori, because she is a financial advisor, founder of her own firm, LVW, which we have put a link in the website. So first of all, how are you feeling today, Lori?
Great. You're making me a little emotional. I don't know. It
We're gonna
comes in
have fun.
waves.
Where are you coming from today?
Believe it or not, I'm coming from Southwest Florida, where it's probably 100 degrees out there right now. So it is hot, and I'm traveling to Austin to see my son, and it's not much better there. So
Wow. Okay. Well, cheers to hot weather. It's
yeah,
May, right? It feels like August, no matter where we are.
so does.
North
Yeah.
Carolina. It's really, for me, I think that's the first time I'm in a sleeveless shirt. Okay, I want to read the bio here. Thank you so much, Kina, for already getting the book. This is going to leave you really awe-inspired. Lori Van Dusen is the CEO and founder of LVW Advisors and has over 30 years of experience. I know she looks super young. She's known for client-focused strategies and has received numerous accolades that have been earned, not paid for. Want to make that delineation. Among them being named Barron's Financial Advisor Hall of Fame, ranked #1 Forbes New York Best in State Wealth Advisors, ranked for not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive years, Forbes America Top Wealth Advisors and Forbes American Top Women Advisors list, named CEO of the Year in 2022 by our friends over at Institutional Investors REA Intel. She started her career at Shearson Lehman Brothers. We remember that name, ladies and gentlemen. Became managing director at Citigroup Smith Barney. In 2011, she founded her own firm, continuing her mission to provide financial solutions. Beyond her success, well, first of all, she's a mother of two amazing boys. You're deeply involved in your community. I've served on several boards, Monroe Community College Foundation, University of Rochester Medical Center Board, and you are also a sponsor of Breakthrough New York, supporting low-income students. Again, I can cry. Your passion, you kind of speaks that you're in such phenomenal shape. You're Rochester, New York, long distance runner, avid yogi, decorating, music, food, Italian families. So we're so excited to hear from you today. So everybody, help me give Lori a warm welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so how we normally like to start out, Lori, is by asking our amazing authors, because we know that this is a hard process, what made you write the book?
Well, I always thought about writing a book, as I kind of went through my career and was baffled by why there were so few women in finance and at higher levels of finance. I thought, I talked to my boys a lot, my husband. I really like to write a book about what I've learned, not a memoir, but a book. And I thought about it. I'm a journaler. I love to write, but it didn't really take shape. And after my husband tragically died, and I say in the book in a very out of order way, not expected at all, in June of 2020, when you talk with someone at 11 a.m. and they're dead at 1, it really changes your life. And that's really what happened. And I was someone who always felt like they could cope with all of these things that I talk about in the book. There's a lot of stories in the book. And I had a lot of tools in my toolbox. I was raised by a great family. I had great role models throughout my young adult life and young life. And I learned how to long distance running is a moving meditation. And I think I learned to process and balance being a mom and being a Wall Street person by physical activity, meditation, prioritization, all those things. And I talk about a lot of that in the book, about how you balance things or, navigate, but nothing can prepare you for a sudden death like this of someone that is your longtime partner or anybody close to you. There's no preparation for it. And there's no competition around loss or death, but when someone dies so suddenly, it's different. And I do think I literally departed my body. My soul left for a while. And when I reintegrated, everything, every moment of every day was horrible. I couldn't work. I couldn't eat. You could probably tell I'm not a heavyweight, but I got down to 89 pounds. And I said, my boys were like, Mom, you need to do something. And they were taking care of me and they'd never seen that before. So I went into therapy And one of the people I talked with was a specialist in PTSD. And they said to me, one thing that might be helpful is journaling. And I'd already done that a lot in my life. I just did. So I started journaling, and over time, I'd be out on a run or outside, and I was starting to feel like I was healing. I came down here to Southwest Florida because everything was shut down in New York. And it was somewhat of a blessing for me. Brought my dog down here and just went to the beach and journaled and ran. And I would be out, take my phone and do a voice memo if something would come to me. And it all kind of took shape in this electronic form. I got it all into my, notes. And I started looking at it after, I've been doing it for about 2 years. And I just heard this voice say, "This is a book." So that's really the story. And then I thought, okay, maybe it is a book. So I started to edit it with my younger son, who was encouraging me, and my older son as well. And then I got to the point where I could write about certain things that were very painful in a truthful way, in a way that had integrity, and I was at peace with, and then I said, okay, I'm going to give this book to 5 people, this, whatever it was, this manuscript. And I gave it to 5 distinctly different people who did not know each other, that I trusted. And each of them said, you should publish this book. So I listened, and I knew at that point, I also heard this voice say, this book is not for you. It was, but it's not. The book is really for other people. So I hired a content editor, and who's great. And I hired, you have to have a good editing team. So I wrote it. I hired a content editor. I hired the legal team. I, went graphics, all the stuff you do, get the people who understand Amazon and how to put it out there, and Barnes and Noble, wherever. And that's really the story.
Well, first of all, I'm so honored that we've got Jeff Thomas, who is on our attendee in here right now. And Jeff Thomas from Swan Global Investments, you sent me this book. I'm so grateful. Like, Lori, these are exactly, and Eric Cott, who we just saw at Invest in Women, who was singing your praises. Literally, we were all sitting down at Invest in Women, and he's like, wow, Lori Van Dusen and her story is so inspirational. I want to thank you both, Jeff and Eric, for being such advocates of Lori. And again, you'll find it very, very emotional. I think the biggest gift that you can give to another person, male, female, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a purple unicorn, is to speak their praises and share their work when they're not in the room.
Yeah.
That's huge.
They're wonderful.
That is what advocacy, and again, sorry, I'm so emotional. That is what advocacy meant. Jeff Thomas had no problem sending me this book. He's like, hey, I'm giving away, I've got lots of copies. I love this. I have got to commend you, because I felt that the writing here, and I'm not just saying this because I'm interviewing you, but the way that the chapters are organized, they're like a little mini life lesson in itself. So if you wanted to move from chapter 2 to chapter 12 and back again, I promise that you'll get something out of it. Yes, there's a chronological movement here and cadence to that, but you write with such rhythm. Like you have like long sentences and then short, pithy, like sound bites. I really loved hearing also too the manuscript in your words. So kudos to you. The fact that it brought you some form of healing and peace after Ron's death, that your sons, Cole and Connor, could be involved in this process, speaks to you very highly as a mother, as a pioneer in finance, as an author. So again, respect to you. Really, really well done. From a graphics perspective, because we are a marketing agency, and I was like, they get a gold star for putting the backdrop of New York City, like these subtleties. Love the quotes. Again, I think people listening here, if you want some inspiration, if you're ever having a down moment, please pick up Lori's book. I promise you'll read something. Okay, our first question comes from, well, it's not a question, it's a comment. Eric Cott says, and again, we sang FA Magazine's, and especially your Invest in Women event, which Lori and I were both there. We'll be there next year at the 10th anniversary for that.
Sure.
Two phenomenal ladies in the industry. Glad Jeff Thomas led the charge. And this is wonderful today, Bess, Eric Cott. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the process. You lead off with your grandfather being such an inspiring part of your life. I'd like to hear a little bit more, and also too, something that we discover about you early on in the book, Lori, is that you're a twin. That's amazing. Wanted to just kind of share a little bit about that.
Yes. So first of all, I would just say thank you to Jeff and Eric too. And that's the definition of grace, extending kindness without expecting anything in return. So that's how I would describe grace, or part of that. And so thank you. I was raised in if it's not painfully obvious, I am part Italian. I'm Italian and Dutch. My mom's name was Van Dusen. Her maiden name was Corletta. My mother was a single mom when my brother and I were 6 months old, and we were very premature. Together we weighed 5 pounds.
Wow.
And at the time, my mom, by the way, this is so crazy, she didn't know she was having twins. And because there weren't ultrasounds and things like there are now. And so here she has these twins. And shortly thereafter, which I talk a little bit about in the book, my mother was divorced. We were 6 months old, and we lived with our grandparents. It's typical Italian, big Italian family. The tribe moves in. And I feel like a tribe raised my brother and I. So when you talk about a village, definitely, like, we were so lucky, on the surface, when you think about, you have these 2 kids, they're, 5 pounds. My mother was told they're not going to live. That was her first news. Hey, you're having twins, then they're not going to live. And then she was told I was going to live, and Scott, my brother, wasn't, and that I was going to be mentally, disabled. There were all of these traumas that my poor mom went through in our young life. But we lived with our grandparents and extended family. And my grandfather had 10 brothers and sisters, and when I tell you they all were involved, they were. And so it was the most joyful, loving. If I had one wish that I could grant, which is impossible, it would be for everybody to have the kind of the kind of loving, beautiful upbringing that I did. So that really formed a lot of my, value set, how I navigated the world, my resiliency. My grandfather was a great mentor. He had an 8th grade education. I was the first person to go to college. And I do say that with all respect to my brother, because I did finish college before him. But then I went to graduate school at Harvard. And to think about some little girl born into very modest circumstances, with a role model, a grandfather with an 8th grade education, to do what I was able to do, I credit my grandfather, my mother, my grandmother, my entire extended family with all that. So my brother and I are very, very close. We're super different. You wouldn't even see probably a physical resemblance, but we are, and he's joked at times, do you think we're really twins? Maybe they switched us in the hospital. I'm like, Scott, seriously? You really think there was another 2.5 pound baby sitting around? So anyway, those are my early roots. I had a lot of exposure to wonderful things from my grandfather that a little girl at that stage normally wouldn't have. I think I was like a muse in a way.
I kind of feel like this, almost like this, as we go through the book, right? As we go through your own journey, And again, getting into Harvard, it's like, God, it's everybody's dream. We fantasize about moments like that. I very much feel that the souls, and I know that your grandfather was alive to see you get into Harvard, right? He
Yeah,
was, right. Okay, right. He
it
was
was.
right. Yeah. And I kind of feel that that family unit almost gave you like a layer of invincibility. Like I was like, you seem like you're very obviously accomplished, but that you were like, no problem. Shearson Lehman, uh, no matter where you were, there's this boldness
Yeah.
about you, Lori, that is again, we do these book clubs for inspiration. So, I'd love to, I would love to be able to kind of pass that on. Do you have any words of inspiration or any advice? We go through periods of being up and down and backwards and sideways and all of that. How do you maintain that boldness throughout the different parts of your life, even when life is changing around you and the situations are less than advantageous?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with many things, but it's multifaceted. But, there are times where even through my healing journey and now, after the book and everything, we all go through difficulties. And I have learned to meditate. And I think being a long distance runner, I do classify that as a moving meditation. And when I could no longer, do that because of all the injuries I've sustained athletically, I still run now, but I found a style of yoga that's, as some people would know it, it's called Bikram yoga, and they still practice it all over the world. And I couldn't even get out of my car at one point. I was so injured, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Because I dealt with my stress or, difficult situations by just going out on the road and running. And so finding this practice really replaced that long distance running. I think we all need to get to a place where, somebody once said to me, and it's so true, the longest 6 inches are between your head and your heart. And if you can get that clear, you're in a good place no matter what is thrown at you. So whatever that is, it's taking care of yourself. It's, taking care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually. And for me, it's a lot of health and wellness stuff. I am not the greatest sleeper in the world, but sleep is important. Nutrition is super important. Exercise, moving, meditation. Sometimes I just take myself out. I really do now. I didn't used to do it this way. I would just go out on the road and run. But there are days when I'm like, okay, I'm not productive or I'm frustrated about this or that. And I will just go for 10 or 15 minutes and meditate, and it changes everything. So I think it's a multifaceted kind of way of really understanding that you have to take care of yourself in order to navigate the frequency that we live on.
I remember because Ron died, you had the pandemic. I remember you in the book, talking about getting into therapy and the idea of, yoga and meditation. The way that I kind of internalize that is that, hey, if you need to take care of you before you can take care of anybody else. But so many of us got like, let's face it, it's very hard industry. It's a very hard industry to work now with all these kind of modern forms of communication, whether or not it be Slack or email or messaging or text or whatever. We feel like we're on this always on. I left again, running with Grace. It was like a over the head, like, okay, Tina, make sure to take care of you. And it's funny because as I look even outside, I was like, remember what Lori said today about meditation, Tina? I need to almost like honor this moment and replenish myself by just sitting outside even for 5 minutes, right? Meditation practice doesn't have to be this like all encompassing,
No,
but
it doesn't. It could just be taking yourself out and going for a walk. And I will say, if you actually, anybody's on here and they want to know how to meditate, there's a lot of apps now or places you can go. But I'll still tell you, being someone who's kind of a professional at it, there are days where my squirrel brain, it just won't shut down. And I'm like, oh, this is not working. I'm not going to be able to do it. And then all of a sudden it happens. So it's, giving yourself a little bit of a window and grace, to do it, because there most of the time I start out like, oh, I can't, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that, but can't check out of this, and it works. And then it just works. It's like magic, and it feels like I slept for a few hours. It's crazy.
Like time like stands still, you go into a state of flow. I've
Yes.
felt that. I've gone through similar things that, I'm identifying with what you say, is that sometimes things feel like a chore, and sometimes things feel effortlessly. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how the titling, again, I felt like you were talking a little bit about the process of journaling as a form of just like healing and bringing you peace and clarity. And I love how each chapter is written in that lesson. It is written as almost its own lesson. You like, how did that creative process come to be with it?
Yeah. You
Of
mean
the
in terms of,
yes, yes, of the
yeah.
oh, like I feel like you could frame all of these. I could have a quote of mixed tiles on my board, on my wall with the name of every chapter, because that in itself is a lesson.
I think it was more, I'm a musician. I think in patterns. And so I kind of think in patterns, and I started with like themes about my life, like developing your own objectivity, resiliency, integrity, all of these things that, are important to me. And then I think about stories in my life, and I kind of had written about all this stuff and organized it that way. So what's a story about, finding your own objectivity or whatever it is? And I'd be like, okay, these things fit. What would I call this? And now it just was that kind of process. It was really patterns and things that if you read through the book, each, as you said, Tina, and thank you for saying this, that each chapter is in and of itself kind of what I've learned, a life lesson. But when it didn't kind of start out that way, it started out with me journaling and then me thinking through my values and how I've navigated life and how am I still standing. And so as I went back, the chapter titling was the last thing I did. It was the absolute last thing, was the chapter titling. And and weirdly, the title of the book, which is a double entendre,
Yes,
because
exactly.
yeah,
Another question you need to talk
yeah. Okay. Well, the titling of it also was that kind of thing where, I know people have different, beliefs, but I'm a believer in the divine. And I think God speaks in simple. And when I hear something so clear after a meditation or a run or whatever, I know it's not my thought, it came from somewhere else. So
Yes.
I was standing in my kitchen with my very dear friend, Dr. Ian Wilson, who has a quote on the back of the book. He is a wonderful guy in every way and creative genius. And he started a program called Wall Therapy that he funded, which is art in the inner cities, taking, graffiti artists and funding them. And they go into inner cities and do these beautiful murals, right? And a lot of people have seen these now, but he was an early person in this whole movement where, a kid that's growing up in, an impoverished setting could walk into their neighborhood and see something beautiful. And so he's just been a dear friend of mine for a long time. And he's a muse. We just bounce stuff off each other. And I love to cook, and I love to invite my friends over when I cook, and he invites himself over usually. It's like, can you make me this? And I'm like, okay, come on over. And I'm talking about the book, and I'm like, Ian, what do you think about this? I don't know what the title should be. I've been back and forth, and I'm cooking, which is also meditative for me. And I'm just doing that creative stuff. And I turn around and I go, running with grace. He goes, oh my gosh, that's great. So Grace was my dog, and as you read in the book, also a loss for me. A year after Ron died, she was my therapy dog in every way, and she died suddenly. And I just talked about, Grace is finding that, inner peace, forgiving yourself, forgiving other people. And, I do think it's extending kindness without expecting someone to do anything in return. It's amazing how virtuous it is. And so that's the name of the book. I can't say it just was planted in my head. I'm not really sure how
Oh, it was
how it
divinely
happened.
guided, totally divinely guided. And
Yes.
so I really felt it was a surprise to learn. I think Grace died at 7 years old, right? She was,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. She
yeah.
was running one day with me down here in Southwest Florida, and the next day wouldn't jump into the car.
Hmm.
And one of my good friends down here was a champion power lifter in New Jersey. He's now like my age, and he was carrying her, into my car to vets. And, they were all telling me, well, I think she has arthritis, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, this dog doesn't she's a beautiful young dog, and she's been right by my side since Ron died. And so finally, I just went to a veterinary hospital and just kind of demanded that she get scanned. And the minute they intubated her, she had cancer everywhere. So that was probably, I don't know that I wrote about this, but that was so hard for my boys because they had to be rocks around their mother, who they always saw as a rock. And I was completely falling apart after their father died. And they never fully grieved him, I think, until Grace died. And when she died, and I had them, one in LA, one in New York, on FaceTime, and I'm at the hospital, the vet hospital, having them say goodbye to Grace. It was brutal as a mom. It was just, we were all sobbing. Jim, my powerlifter friend, his son, we're all just totally losing it. Everyone loved Grace. She was like a being. She wasn't like a dog. She was like this beautiful being. And people would just walk up to me, I love your dog. And anyway, so that's the running with Grace is a double entendre. So
Yeah, and we all know, and I know that Kina has a horse, Monsanto. I know Jamie also too has a super cute dog. I had Mookie for 14 and a half years. So as I was reading, I felt like crying when Grace died, because I don't think I'm still over Mookie, and Mookie was over 3 years ago.
yeah.
So I know I know I could, and as you explain it about your sons and how they, fully grieved the loss of their father and the timing of Grace, like it all makes sense. It's just all
Yep.
an outpouring of emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, it was rough.
Let me ask you about your favorite chapter. What was the favorite chapter to write and why?
Oh gosh.
I know it's a
Well,
hard question.
I have
I
my
asked.
least favorite chapters, but because they were really difficult, in different ways. But I think my favorite chapter, let me think about this. Oh, I think my favorite chapter was the Bernie Madoff chapter. I think it was just because I realized a lot going through that. When you're writing a book and you're going back in time, what I did with a lot of these chapters is I brought people in. So I had these 5 beta readers when I was done, but during the process of deciding it was a book and content editing, I would take a chapter, and the person that I described, who was my teammate, a guy that joined me, who was my head of research, was with me during the Madoff, all of the things that I write about in there. And so he's a great guy. His name is John Martin. He lives in Austin now. And I said, John, will you read this chapter with me and the content editor? Make sure my facts are right. Make sure what did I forget? It was just really validating and fun for both of us. We were just like, wow, this really, really happened. So I don't know if that was my favorite, but it's the one, I thought about this too, we're all lucky to have, if we really think about it, mentors of some kind. And I used to say for a long time, like, I had no mentors in finance, which I thought was true. Like, I really never got a piece of business from a firm, even though I was a managing director, and I had, almost $6 billion under management, with a desk and a phone and a wonderful team that I had hired and mentored. But I never thought, like, my male friends would end up, getting referred stuff that was big and sophisticated. And I'm like, wait, I have this big sophisticated business and I'm never getting any referrals. I just had this kind of perception of things. And writing the book, actually, but I've always never been negative about it. It's just a fact. But I realized in writing that chapter, when I disguise names of people. So the reason I do that is because the book isn't about other people. And I also don't want to bring people into my story, that I wanted to protect people's privacy. But 2 weeks ago, the person that I talk about in that book as a famous genius mathematician died. And he was a very well-known man in his 80s. He was brilliant. And talk about gracious. We, myself and my teammate, who was my head of research at the time on my team, that went in to do a finals presentation at this very well-known institution. I was 13 years into my career. I was, I worked very hard, and I knew a lot about what everybody now calls alternative investments. So we had very sophisticated clients. And I was invited in because someone on that board was a client on another board. And we got a shot. We were up against Goldman Sachs and all the big dudes. And I go in, and I'm with Smith Barney at the time. And I go to the basement of this college university, and there's this brilliant man and this whole investment committee. And he's sitting like this with his legs crossed, smoking a cigarette. And he goes, go on, tell us what, basically tell us what you could do. So I go through my whole thing. I write about it, so I won't. But I realized when he died 2 weeks ago, I just kind of got on my knees and said, thank you, God, for this person, because he hired us. He hired me. And he could have hired all the guys that came in from all the other firms, but he hired me because he thought I understood the portfolio the best and would do the best job. And he didn't think, oh, this is a young woman, or, oh, I gotta, well, whatever. He hired me. And he was a mentor. I looked up to him. I feel like he taught me a lot, and vice versa. I learned from him, but I thought, gosh, thinking back on that story, and I don't want to hijack it because somebody hasn't read it. It's just so great. I love the story, but I will say he was a wonderful, people figure out who it is, but he was a wonderful, wonderful, kind human who was one of the most successful people in finance ever, a billionaire, multi-billionaire, and yet kind, humble. And it gave me a shot to run this portfolio. And we ultimately helped this particular university hire their own internal staff over time, but we were the outside, kind of chief investment officers for a long time. So anyway.
I was so happy at one point in your book when you have you had the biggest deal and your book was like, that's yours. And you're like, that's me. I just love the way I love a great comeback, Lori. I love a great story. I love that kind of surprise, oh yeah, actually that's mine. Thanks.
Yeah. I don't know. I think, there were never times where I felt like I don't belong here, or I'm out of my, I think you live life out of your comfort zone. You really live, and you just keep learning, and you don't think, oh, I can't do this. That was one of the things I was taught as a little girl. I was never taught to be in a box, or you can't do this because you're a woman, or never. Now there are realistic things, like I'm never going to be a prima ballerina, but I there are certain things we can't do, but I never put my own limits. I never imposed limits, I guess, which ended up being worked out pretty well. And my grandfather was a proponent of the power of positive thinking. And
Mm.
I think if I could see it, I could do it. And I am pretty big on that visualization and thinking through the how versus the why I can't do something.
Well, you had to have the power of positive thinking because again, throughout the book, and we're going to get to Bonnie's question in just a second, you take me for a wild ride. Um, when you were getting sued, and we could talk about that in a second. I want to get to Bonnie's. Like I literally had palpitations, and I was like, man,
Me
come
too.
like can't like why can't we give this woman a break like this on top of that and
Yeah.
as different advisors are thinking about moving their business, I think it's not only a story of what happened to you then, but it's still very much like a contemporary story. We see movements, M&A, people, just look at FA Mag, right? This person joins that person, joins this person, and broker protocol and how that's changed throughout the years. So we'll go back to that in a second. I'll hold that thought for a minute. I wanted to get to Bonnie's question, which is a really good one. And thank you again. You guys know that I appreciate it. If you want to, feel free. We love lots of hearts in the feed as well today. So Bonnie, and again, thank you for being a long time book club member here. Do you have any preference of working with women versus men? And then I think a follow-up question to that is, what was the reaction from both your clients and the people you're working with after the book?
Well, in terms of team members, employees, I loved having a diverse team. For a long time, I've had a chief operating officer with a Fortune 500 background who is a woman. I'm not going to say she's retiring. She's not going on to anything else. We just hired a new chief operating officer, but Kim is too energetic to retire. But it was really great to have a woman-led firm, and especially in finance, it's just so unusual. Um, I think, diversity in thinking and people is wonderful. And I don't really think in gender, honestly, and I don't think in any kind of categories. I think one of the things, I don't know where it comes from, but I just read people and their energy, and we have a wonderful culture that she helped build. Just really people who really care about each other and are doing, the right things for clients and really solving problems, and they work together and they pitch in. So I don't really have it's really more about the people and their value set, which makes the culture. And in terms of clients, it's kind of weird. I never had a lot of women clients simply because I think, it's just a numbers thing. Our clients were business owners, entrepreneurs, colleges, universities, and the people who sat around the boards. And they just happened to be a lot of men in finance. And so our verticals of clients were entrepreneurs, a lot of first generation entrepreneurs like me, or business owners. We have a lot of professional investor clients where they might run a hedge fund doing something and we manage everything else around that. We have some professional athletes, like a small number, and famous musicians, which I'll get to one thing about that. And then some colleges, universities, and a small number of endowments. Now, our business is different than it was like several years ago. It's not, I really think at this point, I would love to have more women entrepreneur clients or more women clients in general, because I think we're perfectly set up for it. And I obviously understand, what it's like to be a mom and to have a mom that you love and care for and be the kind of, person who's responsible for all these things and trying to find balance. And I think I can resonate with people who are doing that, but we never kind of actively went out like Sally Krawcheck did and branded ourselves that way or really marketed that way. But I would love to have more women clients, because I do understand how difficult it is to balance all these things and show up and not lose your mind and get your kids on the bus and do all those things. Clients, I didn't broadly send out the book to clients. I may do that. Tina, we talked a little bit earlier. I may do that, but I did send it to COIs and friends. And I was so overwhelmed last year, the last few years, but every year I always sent out a holiday card, and I couldn't do it with writing the book and publishing the book. So instead of doing that, I sent books out finally in the first part of the year. And some of the people on the book on the list that got books were clients, and overwhelmingly, I had really beautiful response. And one of our clients, who's a famous musician, sent me a text and said, I just finished your book and thank you so much. I'm totally related to so many things I had no idea about you, and blah, blah, blah. And, what I would say about all of us is that we're more similar than we're different. You can see somebody and say, oh, this person's so successful, they're a billionaire, this is a famous musician, what do I have in common? And I would say in the end, we have way more in common than we do have differences. And if we lived by that, things in politics, things in life would be a little bit different. But yeah, I've learned it over and over and over again, to my story about the brilliant genius mathematician that for whatever reason hired me. Just you can meet people here. If you meet them here with kindness and respect, it's amazing what happens. So
I think people see in us things that we can't see ourselves. And I think that he probably not only saw you, the brilliant mathematician, not only saw you at the place where you were then, but also too could see the person that you were poised to be in the future, right? He saw yourself, your present self, as well as your future self. It's kind of what I see.
yes.
He saw an amazing potential and, just some qualities. It's interesting how we connect to other people. I do also too want to say, oh, she disappeared. I wanted to say, I saw Deborah Fox in here for a little while, another pioneer, female powerhouse in the industry. I think all of us are like, I love that there's this like-mindedness and there as well too. Yeah, did you want to talk about a little bit about the musicality? Do you sing, like, what are you doing right now in terms of your musical ability? Maybe you
Nothing.
like maybe
Nothing.
we'll need to
But I
get
have
that,
a really nice grand piano for sale right now if anybody wants it. It's rare. I'm downsizing, selling homes, and I'm like, that's my big thing today. What am I going to do with this beautiful piano? My younger son's a really brilliant musician. He's a music producer in LA. I did go to music school when I was a kid. After high school, I went to the Eastman School of Music in the prep department, thought that was going to be my major and that's what I was going to pursue. But when you go to conservatory, you study opera, or at least you used to study classical music. Taught me an awful lot in terms of discipline. And I really do credit being a musician with those pattern recognition things that people don't always see, bringing things together that seem random and organizing things and thought differently, creatively. Music is a wonderful thing to expose children to, even if they don't end up becoming a musician. It taught me composure because I had to sing in front of, they still do call them juries, where, in order to stay in school, you would have to perform like 5 or 6 pieces or something like that. And they'd be in different languages and I wouldn't understand them, but I'd have to diction wise be able to sing. And you just walk in a room and people are sitting there and they're all famous musicians or professors that are really, very credentialed. And you go in there and they go, okay, start. And kind of like the Bernie Madoff story. Okay, go. And they just start writing, you open your mouth and there's like, they're not looking at you. There's nobody. And then you leave. And then you find out whether you're going to get back in or not. So I think it taught me a lot about composure in front of people, audiences, about,
finding my, true objectivity, a lot of things. Music taught me a lot. And yeah, there is and you use the word cadence, which I love. I think there's a cadence in things in life. And when you have that, and you see it, it's really beautiful. There's a rhythm, there's a cadence, there's a way of navigating circumstances that is really beautiful. You can't even, it's divine. So when you tap into that with people energetically, or in a room, in a boardroom, or whatever, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I felt it. I literally felt it. And look, I love music. I love lots of different kinds of music. And I just felt that, especially listening to the audiobook in my car, that it was like things were a certain tempo. I played guitar in high school. I didn't stick with it because I didn't like my guitar teacher. But what is the thing that chip 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 the
Metronome,
yes,
the
exactly,
metronome.
right? And I
Yeah.
felt that I really honestly felt that in the words that. And Brian Portnoy, who is was on the book club, behavioral finance expert, wrote the book on geometry of wealth. He actually, when I was asking him about his process for writing the book, he like went through the beginning to make sure like that cadence, that underlying like poetic tone of sentences being long and short, and he would go back to the beginning of the manuscript and literally like lay it out all over the room to make sure that it flowed a certain way, like how you're explaining, like a song. I would love to see a future, and again, I'm a marketer. I would love to see a future event with you and your son and the clients, not only sharing your story, but also to introducing some music to it. I think like music,
Yeah.
great equalizer when we're in it, when we're trying to, um, go from one thing to another. I was actually playing, unbeknownst to all of you, I had YouTube blasting earlier today because it's a way for me to like pump myself up, get my energy going high. I knew that I had this conversation with you. I wanted to approach it from a place of like high energy, positivity. And I think that music allows you the ability to
Yes.
channel that vein. And
Yeah, I agree.
so secretly,
Yeah.
we should all be like, before big client meetings, conversations, we should be like, like the guys who are doing CrossFit, what do they do?
Yeah.
Watch
The
good.
football players, like right
Exactly.
before the big game.
Right. Any sports event
Yeah.
has like music, and whether or not it's football, baseball, basketball, there's always like music. So I really
Well,
felt
that's
that.
why I put my AirPods in, because I realize that there's music on in the background and I tune it. It's just there. I don't even hear it, but I'm like, oh, I wonder if everyone can hear that. So,
Oh. Um, So I imagine that again, you've got a great firm. Looks like you've got a great team of people. One of the things a lot of us are very proactive about is getting women in the industry too. I want to give a big shout out to Cheryl Hickerson, who's not in the room right now, couldn't be here, but with her and Females in Finance. And we posted this on Females in Finance Facebook page today too. How do we get other women in the industry to get through some of those real hard points and challenges that you were able to get through?
yeah, that's also a multifaceted answer, but I guess I would say, do look for mentors, and mentors in unusual places, not just in finance. I mean, just people that you respect and look up to, who've been successful by whatever measure that you have, and seek them out. It's so, I when people ask me about being a mentor, I think it's a privilege and an honor. So I wouldn't be shy about that. Learning from setbacks, I talk about that in the book. And I talk about, doing a post-mortem on every failure. And I've had some epic failures, which I describe in the book. And, my business plan for LBW it was really doing a post-mortem on how I had so failed and almost lost everything financially right before I formed the company.
Oh, that
And
was so.
yeah, just get, but I was like, okay, I meant to do this. I won, and again, it's all in the book, but I meant to stay in finance right now. That's what I'm being told. So let me learn from all of the things that went wrong. And there were many things that went wrong, and it's painful. And I would just say to everybody, it is painful to learn from your own mistakes. It's hard on your ego to just go, wow. And I do say this in the book, when I was beating myself up while I was forming LVW, but for all of these kinds of mistakes and things I didn't see, I was with a friend, and he looked at me and he's like, Lori, don't beat yourself up. You weren't smart enough to know that, And he says he didn't, I say it a little kinder in the book, but basically that's what he said. And it's true. You learn from these failures and these setbacks, and they can become your future business plan if you allow them to be. And if they don't, then you're really not growing and learning. And so I'm not saying, go jump in and fail, but failures really do teach you a lot if you allow them. And I guess I would say, don't look for fairness and equality. It doesn't exist. And if you're looking for that, it's going to be very disappointing. But I think instead, seek mentorship and support, and seek out people. When I started out and I was a young mom, there really wasn't anybody that looked like me, and it was lonely. It's less lonely now. And I think that people can help you, encourage you. You can put a little tribe around yourself. There's some great organizations in finance and outside where you can just talk through things. And I think all of that, my book, one of the values that I have is be authentic to yourself. Don't try to be anybody else, because, and I think the reason that, I was able to get through things is that I knew who I was, and I wasn't, and there's a lot of that in the book. There's a resilience, and I know who I am. I'm going to be my authentic self. I'm going to show up as this person. I can't be anyone else. So, and people read it. And I think that could be going back to the Bernie Madoff story. That's why I was hired. I think it was not only, well, this person knows this, but I trust them. I trust them because they know themselves,
Yeah, Jeff Thomas loved that chapter, by the way. Thank you for chiming in. Okay, 4 minutes to go here. I'm going to try to get in this last question, and then one after that. So Bonnie is curious to know whether or not that you act as a mentor for young women groups, college finance majors, young females and business roundtables. That's a question from her. Are you presently doing that right now? I know that you've got all kinds of things, and let's face it, a lot of these wounds are I imagine still open. There's a lot, like, I feel like you've been through a huge amount of things in a very short time.
Yeah, I do. I have for a long time been involved in a lot of different things. I love getting involved in like starting and doing scholarship programs, and think that, my story is one about, if I had access to education, and people who cared about it and mentored me through that. So I have done a bunch of things around trying to, I think that is the ultimate equalizer. If we can create equality, it's through education, and then it's up to you. And that can look a lot of different ways. There are a lot of different, not everybody is going to go to Harvard, but some folks, there are so many other avenues that, if you can take a kid and open their eyes to things they can't see, it's pretty powerful. So I have done a lot of that. That's what Breakthrough is all about. You mentioned Breakthrough. We have I think it's a 97% success rate of taking kids over 10 years from the different boroughs in New York City that are in impoverished circumstances and getting them to great colleges. So, if you put your hands on something and you put resources around it, you can change lives that way. And you can't change everything, but you can kind of do it one person at a time. In terms of finance, I get reached out to a lot, and I am involved. I'm getting involved in one organization. I always say yes if someone reaches out to me and wants a mentor. And I love helping people get through things that I may have similarly experienced, and maybe helping get them to the right person or the right place or the right resources. So yes.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left, and here's where I might get a little bit emotional again. Father's Day is coming up next month. It's the anniversary of Ron's death. I believe that you were married for, did I read that right? 30 years? Yeah. 30
Yes.
Not another Father's Day will ever go by that I won't be thinking of you. So I want you to know that all of us are wishing you and your sons and your family peace on Father's Day. And you've given us just such a gift of you being here. And again, I really hope that this is shared with the world here. We all can learn so much from it. So inspiring. And again, if you want to hear Lori's voice in the car, she's reading the whole book. Any final thoughts?
Well, I would say the Audible doing that was really fun. People think it's a bear. It was super fun. But again, I come from a music background, so I loved doing it. And I did it because people said to me, you got to do your own book. I love it when the author reads the book. So
Me too. As in somebody that has like interviews a lot of authors, and in terms like, let's face it, we're back after the pandemic and we're going to the office and we're on planes, trains, automobiles, and that commutation and filling that part with your mind. So I highly encourage all of you. I will be reaching out singularly to each one of you. You know that I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here, Lori Van Dusen. I can't wait to see you at the Invest in Women, the 10th annual next year in 2025. It'll be here before you know it. I think it's less than a year away, actually.
Yes.
So again, thank you for just being you and for the power of sharing your story. We really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you, Tina. I loved it. It's great. Thank you. Even if you made me cry.
I know. We're both crying. Crying is a good thing here. I can't help but to feel again all forms of emotion, which is what it means to be human and alive. So
absolutely.
And thanks for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
See you soon. And Kina said that this interview was incredible and uplifting. And yes, after you read the book, you will realize how awesome it was. And then with the contextual story of Madoff and everything here, you will have newfound appreciation as I did. So Lori Van Dusen, best to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you.
Everybody have a great
Bye.
day. Bye.
Bye.